What's going on YouTube? It's Brock back here with another episode from the House of Strong. On today's episode, we're going to talk about, should there be a World Strongman Federation, an International Strongman Federation? Stick around because we're about to find out. Alright everybody, let's talk a little bit about federations. And what are they? What do they do? So right now, we don't have a World Strongman Federation. We don't have an International Strongman Federation. Basically, it's everybody for themselves, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? A lot of deregulation allows us to do whatever we want. But what could they provide that would make things better for the World Strongman athletes and for the fans? There's a couple of different things they bring to the table, and we're going to talk about those. So first of all, probably one of the more important things that people really like to know when it talks about Strongman is world records, right? Obviously, the biggest one that we've talked about recently is the deadlift world record. And what is it? Currently, people argue, is it Eddie Hall with 500 kilos or is it Hathor Bjornsson at 501 kilos? And depending on who you talk to and what their feelings are about it, you'll get different answers. With the federation, we might be able to smooth out some of that argument. It would lay down the rules that would be required for you to fulfill in order to set a world record. Now, it could be anything from calibration of plates and certain bars to do you have to do it in a competition, not do it in a competition. There's a lot of different ways that this could go. And having a federation would allow you to do things like that. And honestly, in my opinion, it probably is about time that we do have some sort of regulation when it comes to world records. I mean, everybody's trying to break these own world records. You have the Guinness Book of World Records, which seems to just do whatever they want to do, it seems like. And then you actually have world records that are recognized by World's Strongest Man, World's Ultimate Strongman, Arnold Classic, Strongman Champions League. You also have Giants Live. There's all these other federations. I shouldn't say federations. I should say events and event organizers that have their own ideas on what a world record should be or could be. With a federation that, endorses all of these different organizers and competitors and whatnot, now we can actually set the standard. Okay, this is what this world record should look like. These are the implements that you should use. This is the distance. This is the weight, so on and so forth. And I think that would be good for the sport. Also, you could endorse all the different types of competitions. You have World's Strongest Man. You have World's Ultimate Strongman. You also have Arnold Strongman Classic, Strongman's Champion League, Giants Live events. You have a lot of events and organizations coming out of the Middle East that, aren't necessarily all on the same page when it comes to strongman events, which is a positive thing too, because you can go any strongman event and it could be anything, right? You could pull a truck, you could pull a plane, you could lift a block over your head, you could do an overhead press with a log. There's just so many different variations, which is nice to see, and I think is great in the sport. And I think that with the federation, there would still have room for that. But then again, it would be nice to say, hey, these are certain events that should be at a competition, or maybe, if you're going to do something, they should be a part of your competition. Something along those lines. But endorsement would be very nice to have, so then that way when people are trying to decide, hey, do I want to go to this event? Do I want to compete in this event? Well, if you're not endorsed, that may have an effect on whether or not athletes go to it or not, which could be good and could be bad. Good, because now you know where athletes are going to try to go. Bad, because now events might die out or whatever just because they're not endorsed by the federation. So there's two heads to every coin so far. They would also be in charge of creating a World Strongman Pro Card. Right now, the Pro Cards are kind of given out by the event organizers. So usually you have to qualify for, say, Strongman's Champion League through Giants Live or official Strongman games. You can then proceed up to like the Arnold Strongman series and so on and so forth, and eventually earn a pro card and be able to compete at a pro level. Unlike in powerlifting and bodybuilding, where there are specific pro cards for different types of federations, which I think is good, and I believe that's something that we should work towards as a strongman community and as a strongman base to help grow the sport of strongman. Right now, there's no real definition of a pro card that is across the board the same. So they essentially just turn pro. That's all it is. We're just going to turn pro. And there would be some benefits to going pro. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. It would also be helpful now that you have a federation to be able to work with other companies to bring in sponsorships, to bring in more money into the sport. And obviously the sport is not all about money, but you have these men and women that are sacrificing a lot to train as hard as they do to compete at a pro level of a sport. And a lot of times they're not getting paid very well for it. You look at Arnold Strongman Classic, it's $72,000 to the top winner, which is good money. But when you look at if you finish 10th, there's only 10 athletes. You're barely making $3,000. So the disparity between first and last is absolutely massive. And this goes for any competition across the board. As a matter of fact, World's Strongest Man, top place, I think, takes home $45,000, which is, when you look at it, compared to other ones, and you're considered the world's strongest man, there's definitely more left to be desired. So it would be nice to be able to work with these different sponsors to be able to bring in more money. Now, not only would they be able to bring in more money, you could now be able to bring in healthcare, bring in doctors, which a lot of these events do on their own. But if you had something that encompassed every single event, every single competition, right, that brought in doctors, that brought in physicians to be able to take care of these athletes and to monitor these athletes, right? I think Arnold Strongman Classic does a really good job with this. Every year they come in, they do a DEXA scan, they do all these health write-ups for them, and I think that's great. But that is not how it is at every single competition. And not necessarily that they should be at every single competition doing a DEXA scan, but if they did offer it at, the larger competitions, World's Strongest Man, World's Ultimate Strongman, Europe's Strongest Man, Arnold Strongman Classic, now you have the opportunity to get tested multiple times throughout the year. And not every athlete is going to the Arnold Classic. Remember, it's only 10 athletes. So this would allow other athletes that don't normally go to the Arnold Strongman Classic to get that kind of medical attention and to see exactly how their body is responding to their training, to their diet, and whatnot. And honestly, it's only going to help the athletes. And that's really what my main concern is helping these athletes to be able to perform at the best ultimate level they can be at. And with the federation, we might be able to establish a better monetary system and health code in order for these athletes to do better and to maximize that potential. We talked a little bit about it, prize money. It would be nice if the federation was able to set prize money, a base prize money line for every competition, right? So as we talked about before, Arnold Strongman Classic, World's Ultimate Strongman, and World's Strongest Man all have different payouts. Now, if we could have a federation and be able to link with all these different competitions and now be able to spread that money out a little bit more evenly, it would bring more money into the sport, hopefully. And now we would have a more, what's the word I'm looking for? An average amount of pay that these athletes can expect from competing. You imagine spending all this time, money, and effort, all the food that you're buying, all this training that you're doing, and you go and you place 15th and you get $1,000. Now, for the love of the sport, you don't care about the money. I mean, Ronnie Coleman, when he talks about bodybuilding, when he started out, he wasn't making any money at all. And he didn't start making money until he was top 5. You know when he went top 5? When he finally won. The best position he'd ever finished was 6 previous to that. So it took him a long time, and he didn't get paid a dime for it. Now, I understand the love of the sport and the love of training, but I also understand that it's good to get paid for what you do as well, to be able to take care of your family and to be able to push your body past those boundaries, because you're not having to worry, oh, well, what am I going to do for money? How am I going to support my family? How am I going to buy these things? How can I get better training and all those things? Because now I know that monetarily, when I go to a competition, there's an actual real opportunity for me to make real money, not just to make $1,000. And that's more my concern. I love the sport, and I compete in it for free now. And I think that a lot of people will compete in it for free, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I would like to see the athletes paid more, so that way they can take care of their families, they can get better, and they can focus on those things. An official amateur circuit would be really cool to see too. Now, right now, the Arnold Strongman Classic does have an amateur circuit. You could also count the official Strongman games as an amateur circuit, and then also the Strongman Champions League you could also count as somewhat a slash amateur slash professional circuit as well. Like the theme so far, right, is that no one is underneath the same standards. Strongman Champions League is 16 rounds. You can only compete at 10 of them throughout the entire year. And there's, I think, a minimum of 12 athletes per contest. So they probably have the most sophisticated and the most well-developed circuit so far. Giants Live does a good job as well. You have, the different UK, Britain, and Europe Strongest Man, and you have other competitions they put on. The Arnold Strongman Series, you do have, multiple events throughout the year to try to qualify for the Arnold Strongman Classic. Whereas when you look at the World's Strongest Man, there's really no qualification process. Essentially, it's an invite. There's no, usually, they invite, past winners. They invite people from Arnold Strongman Classic. They invite people from, Europe's Strongest Man and all those things. But there's no set in stone. This is how you qualify for World's Strongest Man. And I think that needs to change. I do think what World's Ultimate Strongman has done, essentially, they've encompassed every single competition that there is out there. And if you win, you place top 3, you finish top 10, depending on what the competition is, you get an invite. And there's almost no set cap on how many competitors there are per competition, right? So there's, I think I counted up, there could be a potential of 34 different competitors to go to World's Ultimate Strongman. Obviously, you have some overlap there. But having a set in stone qualification process specifically for like World's Strongest Man, I think is something that needs to be in place to make sure we're getting the best of the best there. How that qualification process works, whether it be, I think using existing events will probably be best. You have the Strongman's Champions League that's obviously well established. The Arnold Strongman Series is pretty well established as well. That'd be another route. And you could use a mixture of new events plus pre-existing events to make that kind of qualification process. Another big thing that a lot of people don't think about is that these athletes are not getting a pension of any type of sort. So the only way that they're saving up for retirement is that money either they win off the circuit, they win at these competitions, or it's from the job that they already have. Now, most other major sports do offer a pension plan, and a part of that, you have to play for so many seasons or play for so many games before you're eligible to be able to participate in that pension plan. World's Strongest Man, if we had a federation, could do something like that for these athletes. A lot of people are only thinking about the here and now and not thinking about later on in life. What happens to these athletes after they can't compete? Well, if all they've done is focus on competing and they haven't had time to work a full-time job or really pursue a job that is going to allow them to save up money and not just pay the bills and live week to week or month to month, it can be detrimental. You see a lot of these athletes that they sell coaching on the side and whatnot, and that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing, and that's an awesome thing for an athlete and a fan like myself to be able to participate in. But to be able to offer these athletes a pension, something that, hey, after your competing days are over, you're still going to get some money from all the time and effort and money that you put into this sport, the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into this sport to make it to where it is today. We're going to give you something back for it. Not just because you competed and you got a trophy or you won some prize money, but even after you're done competing, we're going to be here to help you along the way. And it goes hand in hand with the healthcare as well. To be able to offer these athletes some sort of specialized healthcare so that they can push their bodies and they can push the limits of what they are doing in the sport right now. And I think a pension would just go further that to be able to put an athlete's mind at ease, knowing that they have the ability to be taken care of to a certain extent after their competing days are over. But who is going to be a part of this federation? And there's a bunch of different options, right? Personally, it definitely has to have people who have been in the sport for a while. whether it be someone like Zydrunas Savickas, whether it be Mariusz Pudzianowski, Brian Shaw, pick a name, Bill Kazmaier, right? Magnus Magnuson. These are greats in the sport who have been a part of the sport for a very long time and are still a part of the sport, either as a referee, as a commentator. They're still involved. And I think using those people to be a part of the World's Strongest Man Federation or World Strongman Federation or International Strongman Federation would be amazing. Have people, have representatives from different countries and whatnot would be amazing. Now, with that, I do believe that there should be some business savvy people on the board as well. People that can talk to those in the healthcare industry, talk to those people in the retirement, or I guess in the 401k industry, if you'd like to say, so that not only are they just athletes, but you have professionals on the board as well to be able to help with those problems that are going to come up, or I shouldn't say problems, but those topics that athletes are going to want to know about and want a part of their federation. Along with that, probably some media personnel, some people to be able to push the sport out, whether it be through ESPN, YouTube, their own whatever, right? That would be the best, I think, to add into it as well. I know what you're asking. Where is all this money going to come from? Should the athletes pay a yearly price to be a part of this? Should we get all the money from sponsorships? And I believe the answer is a little bit of both. If athletes were able to pay into it once you receive your pro card or your amateur card or however you'd want to work it, yes, you pay into it, and that way you're going to get something out of it later on. But also with your sponsorships, they already have great sponsorships with people like SBD, Kinda Fit, Kinda Fat Apparel. They have it with Rain Body Fuel. And so those are some of the bigger ones that, we see at every single contest. Rogue is another huge one. So these sponsors are already giving a lot of money and will continue to give a lot of money. And if they were able to have these competitions with, say, a major sponsor supporting it, right? And this doesn't necessarily have to be one of those four that I mentioned. It could be anybody. But you pay, let's say, for example, Coca-Cola or Pepsi wants to put on an event, a strongman event, and that's going to be their main banner, that's going to be the main sponsor. So they're paying for that name to be used at said competition. And that was how you would get your prize money. It would go into the federation itself, and to be able to pay the athletes the pension for the health care and also for the prize money. And honestly, I think it's very doable. We see it throughout sports already. You name a stadium after a company and they give you so much money. You name a field after somebody. You name the college football has the different bowls, and they all have different names attached to them. And all those people are paying money for their name to be on there, right? The Tostitos Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Bowl, the Goodyear Bowl, you name it, they have a bowl for it, it seems like. So we could do the same thing for Strongman to be able to provide money for the athletes and to inject money into the sport to be able to grow the sport. Now, there are some cons to this, and one of the big ones is that right now, Strongman is kind of free to do whatever they want to do. They're not restricted by any rules, any regulations per se from the outside community or from outside people. So they're kind of free to do whatever they want to do. But, that has its cons as well. Now world records are largely disputed, like we talked about earlier with the deadlift. So it leaves a lot of room open for interpretation, which is not really that good when it comes to wanting to grow the sport. But I do like the variation in events, and I do think that you can integrate those two things going forward into the sport and into if you did have a federation. And another big one, as you see with any sport, could possibly be corruption. I mean, let's face it, every single sport has had some sort of instance of corruption within it. And that's a chance you take. And I believe that with transparency and with the right people in place, that we could keep that to a minimum. We could keep that from happening, and hopefully we do. It's something that's a risk that I personally believe I'm willing to take and that other people be willing to take in order to grow the sport even more. Let me know what you think about having a federation. Should there be a federation? Should there not be a federation? What will we call it? World Strongman Federation, International Strongman Federation, the Federation of Strongmen and Strongwomen? Let me know in the comments below what you think. If we did have a federation, what they should be. Go ahead and hit the like button, hit subscribe, go ahead and support the channel. We have more news coming out. We have more content coming out. I appreciate you guys watching the video. Go out there and be strong, and we'll check you guys later.